As Nigeria seeks new pathways to economic growth, attention is turning to intellectual property as a powerful tool for driving innovation, investment, and trade. Now, stakeholders say unlocking the value of ideas could strengthen businesses, create jobs, and open up new opportunities across the economy. However, experts argue that intellectual property should no longer be viewed solely as a legal safeguard, but as a strategic economic asset. They say stronger policies, effective enforcement, and a more business-friendly environment are essential to encouraging innovation and attracting investment. For many entrepreneurs and small businesses, the challenge is not just creating ideas, but turning them into commercially viable ventures. Industry players are therefore calling for better access to financing, technology transfer, and licensing opportunities to help innovators grow and compete. In response, the federal government is implementing reforms under the National Intellectual Property Policy and Strategy to modernize the country's IP ecosystem. The initiative is expected to boost national innovation, expand trade opportunities, and drive sustainable private sector-led economic growth. Well, let's get to our first conversation today. And my guest is the Chairman Organizing Committee of the All Intellectual Property Summit, Mr. San Mbakalu. He joins me live from our Abuja studios. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, let's start with the place of intellectual property in its entirety, talking about national and economic policies, why it matters at the moment. Tell us whether African countries are fully integrated into this.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me again. Intellectual property over the years has been seen as an instrument of foreign tools. That means it's not owned by Africans, it's not owned, for example, by Nigerians. For the integration of Africa, AFCFTA IP protocol has given us that platform to be able to allow African businesses in this context, Nigerian businesses, to be able to own and commercialize their own business ideas. Because for international trade, which is an ecosystem I play strongly in, for the sustainable international trade is on the backbone of intellectual property. Without a strong intellectual property system, without you owning what you produce, branding what you produce, you might not be able to sustain international trade. So for us at All African IP Summit, we, over the years, for the past 7 years, we've been bringing policymakers, stakeholders, business owners together to be able to define how IP can work for Africa and Africans. Our aim is to stop making IP an only legal instrument, but an enabler of trade, an enabler of international trade, and by, most importantly, a sustainable factor that will enable trade to scale, to enable businesses to expand and commercialize and grow their own enterprise.
It's a good way to start it, but you just mentioned the AFCFTA, and that would be my next question to you, really. We've been talking so much about the AFCFTA across the African continent. Then generally, I want your views with regards to this. I saw your meeting with the Secretary General and all of that happened in Abuja a few days ago. But how well would you say African countries are keen into the AFCFTA, the positives of it? I'm yet to see us highlight the gains.
Yes, the Abuja some few days ago, precisely on the 30th of June, the 18th meeting of Council of Ministers met in Abuja, and congratulations to the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment for emerging as the chair of the Council. Implementation has started under AFCFTA. This is the first time for over the years, for centuries, that Africans are coming together to trade more with themselves under the platform of AFCFTA. But they cannot trade and sustain this trade without several protocols. And one of the most important protocols is the AFCFTA IP protocol, which captures different aspects of intellectual property, from trademark to copyright to geographical indication to traditional knowledge, traditional cultural expression. So what this has done is for Africa now, when we trade with ourselves, we own what we trade on. And for AFCFTA, implementation has started, and it's a gradual process. And it's interesting to know that all African countries, especially the state party, have keyed into this. And I can assure you, with the growth of intra-African trade, it will transform Africa, it will create wealth for Africans, and that wealth will stay in Africa. This cuts across all sectors. This is not just an intellectual property just for, say, for example, for the agricultural sector. It cuts across even pharmaceutical industry. We can start producing our medicine in Africa and owning our intellectual property and selling not just for Africa, but to the global markets. Thank you.
Good stuff. Now, let the focus now of the All-African Intellectual Property Summit. You've mentioned a bit of it, but can you tell us what conversations are most critical at this time, and what concrete outcome and partnerships should we be expecting? I saw that this has been on since 2019.
Absolutely. When we started up with the All-African Intellectual Property Summit, it first of all started as a town hall meeting where we discussed intellectual property. But we realized that Africa itself is fragmented in different regions, or RP, or RIPO, on what concerns intellectual property. We said, no, we cannot be fragmented by way of having different regions with different intellectual property systems. Africa has to come together. So we started having this conversation, how can we come together? And then AFCFTA came. AFCFTA brought everyone together. So the All-African IP Summit over the years, just for example, last year when we had the 6th edition in Senegal, we talked about what is the IP ecosystem we want for Africa's future. We define it that the future we want for Africa is for IP to work for Africans and for us to harmonize our systems where a Nigerian can register its products across all the 54 states. 54 countries. So this year, the 7th edition that will be taking place in Nairobi, Kenya from the 11th to the 13th of November 2026. The theme is mainstreaming intellectual property for trade, industrialization, and creative economic transformation. We all know that Africa's strength lies in creativity. For example, our Afrobeat has gone global. But it's interesting to know that we don't own those assets because where its domain is outside Africa. So we're saying in this year, we're saying how do we mainstream intellectual property in trade? Because over the years, intellectual property has been seen something that is a passive. Businesses see it as a burden, but it must be integrated into business as an infrastructure, an asset, intangible asset. And the finance, the banks, the policies that we make must be able to enable businesses to sign up and to register intellectual property, not just in one country, but across the board. So this year's All-African Intellectual Property, we are bringing stakeholders from private sector, from policymakers to academia, to right owners, together in Africa, in Nairobi, to discuss how do we mainstream. By discussing, we'll be able to formulate policies, agree, and push out for advocacy for reforms that will enable IP to work for Africans and Africans, by extension, changing IP narrative in Africa. That means that filing in Africa, filing by African businesses should be able to scale up. And businesses should start seeing intellectual property as an integral part of their business expansion and growth.
More interesting stuff. Now let's speak more about how private sector actively has been participating in the Intellectual Property Summit. Beyond attendance now, can we have specific investments, partnership innovations, and adoption of IP systems? What tangible incentives would you say exist for businesses to engage and benefit?
Because we just secured, we've always been partnering with AFCFTA Secretariat in Ghana, and the AFCFTA Coordination Office have also supported it over the years, and I believe that will continue. So what we have done is that implementation is key. So private sector comes to air their opinion, how they understand intellectual property, and what the government policy should do to enable intellectual property system to benefit them. Because you can have policies and it's not implementable, because the whole idea is that IP has to be commercialized. And governments must put policies in place to enable the private sector easily benefit from filing. So what we do when we bring the policymakers and private sector researchers together is for everyone to be in the room and have a common ground on how they will forge ahead. So when government does put policies in place, private sector will be able to benefit from that policy that we put in place. By extension, it will bring in investment. Because over the years, we've had investors from across the continent coming together to discuss it, and it will continue like that even in Nairobi.
Now, the alignment between intellectual property frameworks and the African Continental Free Trade Area is something that I'd like you to also help us understand, and how fragmented IP system could slow intra-African trade, including what harmonization would mean for cross-border businesses following the sideline meetings with the Africa AfCFTA SecGen.
Yes, absolutely. Without harmonization, we cannot have a smooth sale of trade. As I've said earlier on, international trade itself, if you look at every product that are internationally recognized, is on the backbone of intellectual property. Currently, we don't have that single system that helps. So you can have digital economy, digital trade protocol under AfCFTA. You can have a protocol on women and trade under AfCFTA. But if you don't have a fully implementable intellectual property system, all this will not stand. So what this collaboration is going to do is to create more awareness, because awareness is key. People must know how to use intellectual property. They must know the integral importance of intellectual property to their brand and to their business growth. So it also has to do with cross-border acceptance of a system. So at this point, under the AfCFTA, we have a system that is bringing in, whether you are operating from Botswana, whether you're operating from Senegal, whether you're operating from Egypt, we're going to be having one single system and one single filing system, one single registration system, where the national system, even though they said intellectual property is domestic, local, but when it's become continental, so you don't need to file different, you don't need to file in different filing, submit different filing for different countries, but we're having a system whereby everything is harmonized under the AfCFTA. That's why our partnership with AfCFTA Secretariat is very, very important, because we are the premium, All African IP Summit is the premium platform that brings all these stakeholders together from the private sector and across different regions. So now, from the private sector perspective, we're not harmonized, we're not collaborating with the AfCFTA Secretariat in Ghana, which will dovetail into other state parties, and we see when reforms, when this full implementation starts, which has already started, will gradually break down this fragmentation and harmonize the system for the benefit of business and economic growth for Africa.
Now, almost finally, Nigeria's intellectual property system, and let's look at its practicality and accessibility, particularly the low level of visibility and utilization. I know we've highlighted this at the start of this conversation, but let's focus on challenges such as awareness, cost enforcement, bureaucracy that may be limiting its impact that's on business and innovation. How do we tend to address this with conversations brought to the fore?
So the good part is that there is a progress being made.
Okay.
For example, Nigeria has a national, for the first time, national IP policy strategy. The copyright has also recently reviewed the act that set up copyright. All these are all aligning with AfCFTA. So the conversation is this: how do we make it implementable? How do we ensure that businesses are aware of these processes, these policies have been put in place? So that is where the All African IP Summit comes in, where we look at these policies that have been put in place, not just for Nigeria, for every other country, so that whatever we do at national level should align to the continental level. We should not do things whereby it's anti the continental system that has been put in place already. So businesses must be aware, awareness must be created, and policymakers must take back the feedback from private businesses to start implementing, whereby so that there will be regular reform and there will not be anti-processes put in place. For example, private businesses, an average business in Nigeria currently does not really know what is the importance and where do I go to file. So what we are doing now is that everyone is coming together saying, this is the way to go fight. That should be transparency. That should be digitalization. And the process of filing should be cut short, not 6 months or as the case may be, or 12 months before someone knows what to do. And the legal system also should be there to be able to pass rulings when there is infringement. And people should also be aware that so the truth is that Africa has come to a stage whereby it is not about piracy now, but we should look at IP as an asset and enabler for trade, enabler for businesses to scale. So if we see it from that economic perspective, what that would do is to see that when a policy is put in place, especially from the government, it's helping businesses to grow, it's helping businesses to create jobs, it's attracting investment into a business. For example, most fintech have grown because they have strong IP system and assets behind them. And there is no business, and if people start seeing that as IP is an asset, businesses start seeing it as something that they must key into, and government starts seeing that whatever policy we are putting in place have to help businesses protect their IP, and to also align with the continental platform that we are doing, which is ASCF. I cannot stop talking about ASCF IP protocol because this is what will harmonize Africa and allow Africans to own, commercialize, and benefit from the idea. So we are envisaging that in the next coming years, banks will use IP as an intangible asset where they can finance. Currently, it's not the case, but we are seeing that as we continue engaging from the All African IP Summit perspective, engaging stakeholders, these reforms will start happening, and IP will become a very strong infrastructure, intangible infrastructure that will create jobs, enable government to key into it, enable finance to come in, and as well as create jobs across board.
It's a good way to live it, Mr. Sandum Bakalu. Thanks so much for talking to us. Chairman, Organizing Committee, All African Intellectual Property Summit. Take care. Hope to have you again on the show soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.